Hey, so just before the video starts, I just want to say a quick thank you to all of the subscribers now, to the now over 1,000 subs that we've achieved over the last few days. I honestly can't believe what has happened. Also, with the Finanzi video, thanks to all the comments and discussions about that. It was really a fun video to make, and I still can't believe that we've achieved over 100,000 views. It's insane in my eyes. I've never even came close to that, and to have achieved that, honestly, I've got nothing else to say apart from thank you. And now, before I talk too long, let's start the video. Enjoy. So, as you're probably aware, KTM has entered self-administration to fight against the incoming bankruptcy. Seeing as I wanted to do a video about KTM's MotoGP project in general, now is the perfect time to do this video. First of all, I'm a KTM fan myself, so I may be biased at certain points during the video. KTM has a huge influence on the MotoGP paddock, providing bikes to Red Bull Rookies Cup, basically dominating the Moto3 World Championship with their bikes and their huge amount of rebrandings, so likes of Husqvarna, GasGas, QJ Motor, CF Moto, etc. Since 2017, they're also competing in the primary class of motorbike racing, and let's say their campaign has been a rollercoaster of emotions. A tough debut season and a lack of progress summarizes their early years, until they have found some momentum in 2020. Until today, they are yet to make the final step to true championship contenders, if they even make it past 2025. In this video, I just want to get through their history in the MotoGP Championship, and go through their progression throughout the years. Let's dive into the wacky world of the Red Bull KTM factory racing team, plus their satellite team. Enjoy! KTM's early presence in motorsport was in motocross, and they won their first ever championship in 1974 when Gennady Moiseyev won the 250cc Motocross World Championship, but we're not here to talk about motocross. KTM began their involvement in MotoGP in 2003, when they entered the 125cc class as a factory team, and from 2005 onwards, they also entered the 250cc class as well. Their biggest success during that time was the 125cc Constructors' Championship in 2005, a second and third place finish overall from Mika Kallio and Gabor Tamaci, a second place overall finish from Kallio in 2006, and a third place overall finish from him in the 250cc class in 2008. Since the first season of the Red Bull Rookies Cup in 2007, KTM supplied the bikes for the series designed for young talents to prove themselves. In 2009, KTM decided to withdraw from their factory teams, probably due to the financial crisis during that same time, which also affected the MotoGP class massively. But in 2012, when the newly renamed Moto3 class went into their debut season, replacing the 125cc class, the Austrian brand was back, and they came back with a bang. Sandro Cortese, riding for the Red Bull KTM Ajo team, a collaboration between the KTM brand and Ajo Motorsport, led by the Finn Aki Ajo, we'll get back to him in a moment, would go on to win the 2012 championship. Ajo would be very important for their success in the FIDE series. In the next two seasons, KTM will retain their Constructors title and would even win one more Riders' Championship with Maverick Vinales. Seems like they know how to be successful in the sport, and by 2014 they have a new goal: winning in Moto2 and in the Premier Class MotoGP. In September of 2014, Pit Beirer, team principal of KTM, announced that the Austrian brand would join the MotoGP class in 2017. They would also make their debut in the Moto2 class at the same time. During their preparations for the MotoGP class, they tested their V4 engine a year and a half before their MotoGP debut, and in October 2015, they would do their first rollout with the KTM RC16, their first ever MotoGP machine. Alex Hofmann, their first test rider, would complete a 3-day test at KTM's home track, the Red Bull Ring. Between their first rollout and their debut in 2017, they would do more tests around different tracks with multiple riders to be better prepared. Part of their test team were Mika Kallio, their former 125 and 250cc rider, René de Punier, and Kara Abraham, who were all former MotoGP riders who would bring in at least a bit of experience. From 19th to 20th July in 2016, the KTMs would compete in their first test against the other MotoGP manufacturers, with Kallio and the Swiss Moto2 ace Thomas Luthi. Their best time was only 1.9 seconds off the fastest time from Andrea Iannone on a Ducati. At the end of August, they would successfully complete their first race simulations out in Misano. Before that, the Austrian GP happened. Andrea Iannone would win the race to Ducati, their first win after Keita Stoner's last win for them 2010. At the same weekend, the KTM factory team would present their MotoGP machine to the public. The RC16 featured the main sponsor Red Bull and the classic KTM colors, and both test riders Alex Hofmann and Michael Kallio would complete a few demo runs around the track. At the season finale in Valencia, Kallio was entered as a wildcard entry for the KTM team, making its official debut to be more prepared for the full debut in 2017, where Mika would start from 20th, but had to retire on lap 11 due to technical issues. The Austrian manufacturer has signed two experienced MotoGP riders for their debut season, with the tech-free Yamaha pairing of Pol Espargaro and Bradley Smith. Both have shown some occasional strong performances in the past, so were definitely a solid choice, even though Smith had the issue of recovering from severe injuries suffered during the 2016 season. Kallio remained their tested and reserve rider who would get some occasional wildcards. It was obvious from the beginning that KTM would need to work hard to close the gap to the competitors, which became evident at the season opener in Qatar when both riders qualified for the back row of the grid, with Pol being the fastest rider 2.8 seconds slower than poleman Maverick Vinales on the Yamaha. While they would at least finish the race with both bikes, albeit outside the points, over 30 seconds behind the leaders. But thankfully for them, both bikes would score their first points of the season in the next race in Argentina, with Pol finishing 14th and Bradley in 15th. Over the course of the season, the performance of the bike would slowly improve, and thus they were occasionally able to directly qualify for the second qualifying session, like in France, where both riders would directly qualify for Q2 and ultimately qualifying 8th and 10th respectively. Their best qualifying performance came in Japan and Australia, when Smith qualified in 7th in Motegi in wet conditions and Espargaro qualifying in 6th in Australia. Their main issue was that they couldn't carry their qualifying results into the races. Throughout the season, their best results were 2 9th places from Espargaro at the Czech Republic and in Australia, with Smith only scoring 2 10th places in Misano and Australia. Bradley's problem was that when Mika Kallio made his wildcard appearances, Mika mostly outpaced him. This and the fact that the expectations placed on him were higher led to criticism from the media, with KTM ultimately having to step in to confirm that Smith would compete in 2018 alongside Pol. Ultimately, the riders finished the season in 17th and 21st, with KTM actually beating Aprilia in the constructors. Okay, fair enough, Aprilia back then was an utter mess, so it wasn't even that hard. An overall calm and solid debut season, with a lot more potential left for more. The real pressure would come from 2018 onwards. Speaking of 2018, how did they fare in their second season? Well, they were disappointingly not moving forward. In Qatar, they would once again start from the back and fail to score points, with Espargaro even retiring due to electronics issues. After that, Pol would at least score regular points with several 11th place finishes, whilst Bradley was not able to match his teammate, only scoring points 3 times in the first 8 races. The test rider Kallio was able to beat both in Jerez, finishing the race in 10th. But then came Germany, a race where KTM brought in many new parts that Mika was supposed to test. But during the weekend, he would suffer a crash in which he has injured himself, and it led to KTM having to sign René de Punier again as a replacement test rider. Further struggles came up in the Czech Republic, as Pol Espargaro became the next rider to injure himself during practice, and he had to sit out for a while. As Mike Leitner, KTM Motorsport chief, admitted, it almost put the project to a standstill, while Smith carried on as the sole KTM in Austria, finishing the race in 14th place. KTM have made an agreement with Loris Bass, to replace the injured Espargaro for the British Grand Prix. But the weekend became infamous for the terrible resurfacing of the Silverstone circuit, which was not able to deal with the huge amount of rain properly. And thus, the race got cancelled. For San Marino, Paulus returned, but he withdrew after 17 laps, probably due to not being fully fit. More drama came Aragon, as Paul again injured himself during practice, being forced to miss the race. Thankfully, KTM did not need to sign a replacement rider, as Paul still raced in Thailand. Smith meanwhile was set to be replaced for the next season, as even Pit Beira was criticizing him for his disappointing performances, even stating that his feedback was not reliable enough because he wasn't going fast enough. Ouch. Thankful for the team, the season ended on a high note, even though it was caused by extreme conditions, as in a race full of attrition from multiple top riders crashing out, even leading to a red flag. It was Pol Espargaro who finished the race in third, giving KTM their first ever MotoGP podium. And with Smith finishing the race in 8th, it was an overall fantastic day for the Austrian brand. Again, the manufacturer would beat Aprilia for 5th in the Constructors' Championship, scoring 3 more points than last year, with the team finishing 9th in the Team Championship. Overall, it was a disappointing second year, but there was a wave of good news on the horizon. First off, it was confirmed that KTM have signed Joan Zarco from the Tech 3 team to replace Bradley Smith from 2019 onwards. Zarco has impressed the paddock with multiple instances of mixing it up with the big boys. It was expected that Joan would elevate the team to new heights and help KTM to move forward. Speaking of Tech 3, it was also confirmed that both KTM and the French outfit would enter an alliance which allowed KTM to increase their bike count from 2 to 4. For Tech 3, Miguel Oliveira, who previously impressed in the Moto2 category, was immediately confirmed to step up to the Premier class. For a second bike, Hafiz Sarin was kept after a quiet 2018 season, riding the Monster Energy sponsored Tech 3 Yamaha. More good news came in with the signing of recent free agent Dani Pedrosa, who joined the testing team alongside an aging Kallio. With these signings and restructurings ongoing, Stefan Pira, the CEO of the Pira Group, who owned KTM, declared that they are going all in with all these changes. Unfortunately for them, 2019 proved to be another tough season, at least on one side of the garage. Whilst Pol Espargaro was regularly fighting for top 10 results, which ultimately peaked in France when he finished in 6th place, Joan Zarco would have a torrid time with the Austrian brand. It never even remotely looked like he wanted to be at the team when he received offers from the Repsol Honda and the Yamaha Works teams after the 2018 winter tests before his manager signed a deal with KTM. His on-track performances were mostly uneventful, even being beaten by Tech 3 rookie rider Oliveira several times, only finishing one race inside the top 10, which was the Catalan Grand Prix, notorious for a Jorge Lorenzo bowling show at the beginning. The relationship between the two parties declined pretty fast, as, according to Beira, he wasn't able to control his emotions and was not really helpful for the development of the bike, and so, after the San Marino Grand Prix, Zarco and KTM would decide that it is the best decision to terminate the contract. For the remaining races, Mika Kallio replaced him and remained rather anonymous, but will still score some points for the team. As for the Tech 3 side, Oliveira easily outclassed his teammate Sarin at nearly every race until he injured himself at the end of the season, being replaced by Iker Lecuona at the final round in Valencia. At the end, KTM would once again finish in 5th in the Constructors, but would score 39 more points compared to last year, thanks to some decent improvements to their RC16. Heading into 2020, there were once again some changes. First off, they abandoned their Moto2 project, meaning that the Aya team switched to Kalex chassis from 2020 onwards. Then came the introduction of a new chassis for the RC16, designed with the input of Dani Pedrosa, which should help them moving forward. Next came the riders. Espargaro would remain with the team, but for the second seat, after Zarco's departure, KTM opted to promote Brad Binder, former Moto3 champion and multiple-time Moto2 winner, to their factory team instead of promoting Oliveira, so Miguel had to remain at Tech 3 for another season. Alongside him, Lecuona would get the remaining bike for the entire 2020 season. In the coronavirus-shorted season, KTM actually showed some serious progress. In a season where Marc Marquez's injury during the Spanish GP has basically thrown any sort of prediction out the window, where multiple manufacturers and riders had a chance to fight for wins and even the championship, the Austrian brand has seemingly made a step into the right direction. From the beginning, the KTMs were mostly able to directly qualify for the Q2 session, and by round 3 in the Czech Republic, KTM have finally won their first ever race. After fighting his way to the lead after an incredible charge, it was rookie Brad Bittner who crossed the line and took the win. Pol Espargaro, who was fighting for the win at the beginning of the race, crashed out after fighting with now Ducati rider Johan Zarco. And whilst no more wins came their way, Pol remained a strong presence at the front of the field, earning 5 more podiums to ultimately finish 5th in the Riders' Championship, his best ever season overall in the Premier class. And even the Tech 3 team would enjoy a decent season, as Iker Lecuona was a consistent point scorer in his rookie season, even though he missed the final races of the season due to being tested positive for COVID. Earning a second year of the team, and Miguel Oliveira earning 2 wins during that year, including a win at the Styria Grand Prix, where he would move to the lead on the final corner on the final lap, profiting from Jack Miller and Espargaro fighting it out. He would also win the final race of the season in Portugal, leading the race from start to finish. At the end, KTM would climb up a place in the Manufacturers' Championship, jumping ahead of a struggling Honda to finish in 4th. An encouraging season, which showed the amount of progress KTM would make, but for 2021, things would change, as after Bittner's win in the Czech Republic, they would lose their concession points, essentially being equal now to the established brands like Yamaha, Honda or Ducati. 2021 would once again see some changes. Their RC16 would once again receive some modifications, including wings on the front of the bike. As for the riders, Binder would stay at the factory team, but Pol Espargaro, after having a superb 2020 season, will leave the team, opting to join the Repsol Honda team from 2021 onwards. Let's just say that it turned out to be a disappointing partnership, but this may be a topic for another video. Replacing him was Miguel Oliveira, finally getting his well-deserved promotion to the factory squad. For the Tech 3 team, Lecuona was partnered with former Ducati factory rider Danilo Petrucci, coming with years of experience to the squad, now sporting a beautiful orange livery, which replaced the Toro Rosso-ish livery from the last few years. All the good momentum from the last season, however, was not used at the start of the 2021 season. In the first 5 races of the season, their best results were a 5th place finish from Binder in Portugal and a 5th place finish from Petrucci in a wet French Grand Prix, whilst Oliveira and Lecuona struggled to reach the top 10 until Iker finished 9th in France. A new frame from Italy onwards saw a huge upturn of fortunes. Miguel scored KTM's first podium of the season for 2nd place finish, whilst Brad finished in 5th, Danilo in 9th and Iker in 11th, scoring a total of 43 points, ultimately being the best manufacturer at this event. And at the next event in Catalonia, Oliveira crossed the line in 1st place, scoring his 3rd win in his MotoGP career. In Germany, Miguel was once again in prime position to fight for the win, but this race was defined by Marc Marquez's first win since Valencia 2019. After that, they would only score 1 more win with Brad Binder at the Austrian GP. This win was even more spectacular than Oliveira's win in 2020, as he won this race in rainy conditions on dry tyres. After that, they would not win another race again this season, and ultimately finished this season in disappointing 5th in the Constructors, falling behind Aprilia, who have found their form this year with Aleix Espargaro. This season was really disappointing for them, as they expected much more after a promising 2020 season. As a result, Mike Leitner, the team principal, stepped down from his role and was replaced by Pramac team director Francesco Guidotti. More news came in the form of a rider restructuring Tech 3. During their free practice 4 session at the Austrian GP, it came out that Raul Fernandez and Remy Gardner, championship contenders in Moto2, would replace Leccorona and Petrucci for the 2022 season. This move came with a lot of criticism of KTM's rider management. Furthermore, it came out that Raul in particular was not really keen on being promoted. He was already in contact with Razlan Razali, team boss of the future R&F racing team for 2022, still using year-old Yamaha bikes in the championship. As a result, KTM basically forced his promotion to keep Raul in their rider pool after losing Jorge Martin in the past to Ducati. Raul then caused more controversy in an interview after the end of the season testing Jerez, basically slamming his teammate Remy and claiming that the IO team sabotaged him to lose the title. As you would expect, this did not sit well with the KTM management, but for now, they had to focus on their bike performances for 2022. And things started out promising, with Brad showing some strong pace in a crazy Qatar Grand Prix, finishing the race in second place, finishing behind Enea Bastianini in a year-old Ducati, and Miguel winning the second race of the season in Indonesia, showing off his strong wet weather abilities. But these results would be their high points for a long time. Even though they remained consistent point scorers, they had no chance to score podiums, as either Fabio Quartararo on the Yamaha, Aleix Espargaro on the Aprilia, or a Ducati would hinder them and finish ahead. One more highlight came in Thailand, as Oliveira won his second race of the season, once again profiting from wet conditions. Brad meanwhile scored 2 more podiums in Japan and in Valencia, with both riders finishing the season in 6th and 10th, with Brad being the quicker and more consistent rider throughout the season. As for the Tech 3 riders, yeah, they had a rough time. Up until the Catalan Grand Prix, Gardner was the quicker and more consistent rider, finishing the points 3 times in comparison to Fernandez, who scored his first point in Barcelona with a 15th place finish. But as the season progressed, Raul became a more consistent point scorer in comparison to Remy, and at the season finale in Valencia, he would finish the race in 12th, 1 place ahead of Remy, and thus he would beat his teammate in the final standings by 1 point. But overall, both struggled to adapt to the machine. The KTM was not known for being an easy machine for rookies, and KTM's biggest issue was that the Tech 3 rider lineup did not include an experienced rider, so that made their campaign even worse. In my opinion, they should have at least kept Leccorona, as his 2021 season was definitely an improvement. But as I mentioned before, their rider management was a disaster. In the meantime, Augusto Fernandez would have a fantastic 2022 Moto2 campaign, ultimately winning the championship and therefore made his claim for a MotoGP seat, thus creating some competition between both riders on who would retain their seat. Ultimately, the management decided to sack both riders and promote Augusto Fernandez, and they also re-signed Pol Espargaro for the rebranding GasGas Tech 3 team. Once again, their rider management became a huge talking point, leading to more criticism by experts, fans, and even the riders themselves. There would also be a change in their factory team lineup, as Oliveira decided to move on from KTM and sign for the R&F team, now running Aprilia bikes in 2022 alongside Raul Fernandez. If you ask me, it's still bullshit that Remy was left without a seat after his rookie season, but this is just my opinion. As a replacement, KTM managed to sign Jack Miller after the Australian rider was let go from Ducati after eventually being replaced with Enea Bastianini. Moving to 2023, things would start in the worst way possible for Pol Espargaro, as he would suffer a huge accident in practice for the Portuguese Grand Prix. He had to sit out for over half the season. The problem was that the young Pedro Acosta was rumoured to move up to MotoGP whilst he was on his way to win a Moto2 championship that year. But it was not their only problem. The start of the season for the entire KTM team was kinda disappointing. Even though their sprint performances were promising, with Brad winning 2 sprint races in Argentina and in Jerez, and both factory riders finishing 2nd and 3rd in the main race, Jerez, the dominance of Ducati that year really hindered their hunt for more podiums and wins. Ultimately, it was Binder who carried KTM that year, often being involved in fights on good positions and scoring 4 more podiums during that year. ultimately finished the season in 4th in the riders' standings. As for Jack, yeah, he was kinda disappointing. Carrying over his trend of having good starts with terrible race pace in Ducati, he often fell down the order after a while, and therefore was not able to score another podium throughout the year. And as for Tech 3, Espargaro's replacement Jonas Folger, who was signed as another test rider earlier this year, had to get back up to speed with MotoGP after he had to leave the sport right before the 2018 season and only scored 9 points throughout his time back in the sport, ultimately handing the bike back to Pole from the British Grand Prix onwards. He was still fighting with his fitness at the beginning. Nevertheless, he still finished 6th in the Austrian sprint race, but otherwise failed to score another top 10 finish. In the meantime, Augusto had some very good results, scoring 4 top 10 results, even finishing 4th in a chaotic French Grand Prix. This led to yet more chaotic rider discussions for 2024. Seeing as Acosta was basically confirmed to move up to MotoGP in 2024, there was a question on who would be his teammate. There were even discussions if KTM was allowed to enter 2 more bikes, this time branded as Husqvarnas, for 2024, just to keep both riders at Tech 3. But in the end, this idea was denied by Dorna, and so they managed to convince Pol Espargaro to step down as a test rider from 2024 onwards, and thus allowed Pedro to step up into the MotoGP class alongside Fernandez. But in a more positive light, KTM has finished in 2nd place in the Constructors' Championship, finishing ahead of Aprilia and the struggling Yamaha and Honda outfits, but at the end they had no chance on beating Ducati, as the Italians had scored over 700 points that year alone, and this Ducati dominance won't change in 2024. The 2024 season has started well for Brad Binder, showing some strong pace in Qatar to finish in 2nd place. But even more impressive was the debut of Pedro Acosta, who managed to fight his way onto the podium spots but would drop back down the order due to overpushing his tyres. He would however make history at the Portuguese Grand Prix, securing his first ever MotoGP podium in only his 2nd start, being the 3rd youngest rider to ever do so, whilst Binder and Miller would finish off a decent weekend with a 4th and 5th place finish. Another Acosta podium followed at the US Grand Prix, even leading the race at one point before being overtaken by an unbeatable Maverick Vinales, being forced to settle for 2nd. From Jerez onwards, they would struggle to secure more podiums in the main race, even though some sprint performances were kinda promising, with even test rider Dani Pedrosa securing a sprint podium in Jerez. One key problem that KTM were not properly able to solve was a new rear tyre from Michelin. Whilst Ducati were able to regularly beat the track records on every circuit, their rivals KTM and Aprilia were not able to match them. Another problem were the disappointing performances from Miller and Augusto Fernandez. Whilst Augusto was only visible for a few seconds this season, Jack either crashed out or dropped down the field again. And with Pedro, Brad, and even their test riders beating him on a regular basis, it was clear that Jack and Augusto had to go. And so, after the Italian Grand Prix, Pedro Acosta was set to join the factory team for 2025, and not long after, Enea Bastianini and Vinales were confirmed to ride for the Tech 3 team, dropping their gas branding from 2025 onwards. At the 12th round of the championship in Aragon, Pedro finally returned to the podium with a fine 3rd place finish. He would proceed to finish on the podium 2 more times, with a 2nd place finish in Indonesia and a 3rd place finish in Thailand, whilst Brad would be the most consistent point scorer for KTM. Even though Pedro was the fastest KTM rider this year, he would also crash out a lot, simply due to his inexperience, which ultimately meant that Binder finished ahead of his future teammate in the rider standings. Still, KTM would finish ahead of Aprilia in the Constructors in what was ultimately a standstill season. But considering that they were already suffering from huge financial issues midway through the year, they still did well. There were however some more changes announced from 2025 onwards. Team principal Francesco Guidotti left his role and will be replaced by Aki Ayo, who was previously responsible for the Ayo Moto2 and Moto3 teams. So, what will happen with KTM's MotoGP project in the future? Well, considering that they have filed for insolvency, I do think that they will ultimately abandon their MotoGP project after the 2026 season. Why? Well, because their deal with Dorna will expire after the 2026 season, and so would be their cheapest option to leave. That would also mean that 2025 and 2026 won't see any major developments, and they will have to cut costs as much as they can during these years. As much as I want KTM to remain, I honestly can't see it happening. However, I'm more worried that KTM's financial troubles will have a severe impact on the Junior Series. Also, Moto3 will turn into a Honda Cup, the Rapper Rookies Cup, and several other junior championships who mostly run KTM bikes will probably have some troubles for the next couple of years. So ultimately, this situation sucks for everyone, and will probably have a lasting impact on the sport.